Something is happening in the paranormal world, and it's darker than anyone expected. Grant Wilson, the co-founder of Ghost Hunters and one of the most respected figures in supernatural investigation, has just broken his silence after years of staying quiet. In a shocking new statement, Grant revealed that what drove him away from the show wasn't fame, burnout, or network drama. It was something else entirely, something that followed him home. What he's describing isn't just a haunting, it's a warning. Tonight, we're uncovering what really happened behind the cameras, the secrets that never made it to air, and why Grant Wilson now says they were never alone. Before we begin, hit subscribe, because once you hear what Grant confessed, you'll understand why he may never speak again. Before the world knew him as the calm, level-headed investigator on Ghost Hunters, Grant Wilson was just an ordinary man with an extraordinary fascination for what lies beyond. Born in Providence, Rhode Island, Grant grew up surrounded by whispers of haunted mill towns, strange lights in the fog, and local legends that seemed to cling to every old house in New England. He wasn't a thrill seeker, he was curious. In the early 2000s, that curiosity led him to meet Jason Hawes, another plumber who shared his obsession with the supernatural. Together, they created TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, a small group of blue-collar truth seekers determined to separate real hauntings from urban myths. What began as two friends investigating local homes soon caught the attention of television producers. In 2004, Ghost Hunters premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel, and everything changed. It was the first show of its kind. Real people using real equipment in real haunted locations. Grant wasn't the loudest or the most dramatic, but he became the show's heart. His calm, skeptical approach made him the voice of reason in a field full of chaos. Audiences trusted him. He wasn't there to perform, he was there to find proof. Within a year, Ghost Hunters was a global phenomenon. Viewers followed Grant and Jason into prisons, hospitals, and abandoned mansions, hoping to glimpse the unknown. But as the lights of fame grew brighter, the shadows around Grant began to darken. During those early seasons, there were moments that never made it to air. Equipment dying at the same time every night, crew members waking with unexplained scratches, and whispers captured on tape that said the investigators' names. Grant started noticing patterns no one else did. "They know we're looking," he told Jason once, "and they're starting to look back." He was right. By the time the Sci-Fi Channel renewed Ghost Hunters for another season, something unseen had already followed Grant home. And from that moment, the man who once hunted ghosts would slowly become the hunted. By 2008, Ghost Hunters had become the crown jewel of the Sci-Fi Channel, a global hit that turned paranormal investigation into primetime television. Every week, millions watched Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes chase shadows through the ruins of America's haunted history. To viewers, it was thrilling. To the team, it was becoming dangerous. Off-camera, the experiences grew darker. Crew members began reporting nightmares after filming, dreams so vivid that they'd wake up screaming, convinced something had followed them back to their hotel rooms. Cameras malfunctioned only in specific areas, as if something didn't want to be recorded. There were even nights when the team's walkie-talkies picked up faint voices whispering their own dialogue before they had even spoken it. Grant tried to stay grounded. He told interviewers that fear was just part of the job, that the real danger came from old buildings, not ghosts. But that illusion began to crack when the paranormal activity started bleeding into his personal life. His wife began hearing footsteps upstairs when the house was empty. Doors opened on their own. Their children claimed to see a tall man with no face standing by the bedroom window. Grant told close friends he believed something had attached itself to him. Not a ghost, but something much older. He began having blackouts during investigations, moments he couldn't remember afterward. Crew members said they'd see him staring into the dark, murmuring words that didn't sound like English. When asked later, he'd simply say, "I was listening." Producers at the Sci-Fi Channel started to notice his demeanor changing. He was distant, distracted, often seen praying alone in dark hallways between takes. During one episode, the sound technician swore that Grant's microphone picked up a second voice overlapping his own, deep, guttural, and repeating one phrase, "Stay with me." Still, Grant refused to quit. He believed that whatever this was, it wanted attention, and walking away would only make it worse. But deep down, he knew something was happening that went far beyond haunted houses. Something had decided that Grant Wilson was its next project. It was supposed to be just another investigation, another haunted location for ghost hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel. The team had been called to an abandoned children's hospital in upstate New York, a crumbling brick structure known for shadow figures, screams in the stairwells, and rumors that the building itself breathed at night. For the first time, Grant seemed uneasy before filming even began. "There's something wrong with this place," he told Jason, though he couldn't explain why. From the start, everything felt off. The air inside was colder than it should have been. Their EMF meters spiked even when no power was running through the building. Every piece of equipment failed in the same room, the old surgical ward. When the crew reviewed the night's audio, they discovered something chilling. Underneath the usual static was a faint, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, and layered over it a whisper, a voice repeating Grant's full name over and over. Later that night, Grant was walking through the lower hallway alone, his infrared camera rolling. The footage was never aired on television, but members of the production crew have since described what they saw. As Grant called out, "If anyone's here, can you show yourself?" A black shape appeared behind him. Tall, thin, and featureless. The camera's temperature sensor dropped from 68 degrees to 42 in seconds. Then the figure lunged. The next moment is burned into paranormal history. Grant screamed, not out of fear, but in what witnesses described as painful shock. His mic captured a guttural, non-human growl before cutting out completely. Jason and the crew found him minutes later, pale, shaking, and covered in scratches that ran from his neck to his wrists. But what terrified them most wasn't the injuries. It was what Grant said afterward. His voice was low, almost robotic. "It wanted me to see. It said I was chosen." The footage was confiscated immediately by the network. When producers reviewed it the next morning, they claimed the last 10 seconds were completely corrupted. White noise, static, and a deep droning hum that caused nausea in the editing room. That episode was quietly reshot and replaced with a different location. The public never saw what really happened in that hospital. After that night, Grant wasn't the same. He stopped speaking freely during investigations, often going silent mid-sentence as if listening to something invisible. Even Jason, his closest friend, admitted later, it was like part of him never came back from that place. Whatever entered that hallway with him, whatever spoke his name, didn't leave empty-handed. By 2012, Grant Wilson was at the peak of fame. Ghost Hunters was one of the Sci-Fi Channel's longest-running shows, and fans considered Grant the soul of the series. So when he suddenly announced his departure in the middle of Season 8, the world was blindsided. The network called it a personal decision. Jason Hawes thanked him on air. But those who knew Grant personally whispered a different story, that he'd been forced out, not by contracts or producers, but by something unseen. In interviews that year, Grant's tone was cautious, almost rehearsed. He told fans he wanted to spend more time with family, but those who worked behind the scenes knew better. He'd stopped sleeping during investigations. Crew members found him pacing hotel hallways at 3 a.m., mumbling to himself. He carried a small notebook everywhere, filled with symbols and fragments of sentences written in handwriting that didn't look like his own. One entry reportedly read, "It's not a place, it's a thing. It waits in the static." The Sci-Fi Channel executives had grown uneasy after several unexplained technical incidents. Lights flickering during interviews, corrupted footage showing brief flashes of faces that didn't belong to any crew member, and audio files that played backwards by themselves. Some believed the phenomenon was following Grant specifically. One producer quit after claiming his home phone began ringing every night at 2:17 a.m. And when he answered, all he heard was Grant's voice, whispering, "Don't let it in." The problem was, Grant was out of state when those calls occurred. When he finally left the show, fans noticed his final episode felt unusually somber. There were no goodbyes, no emotional speeches, just Grant staring quietly at the camera, his expression unreadable. In later interviews, Jason admitted he never got a proper explanation. Grant simply told him, "We pushed too far." After his departure, he vanished from the public eye. No conventions, no interviews, no statements. He deleted social media accounts and stopped responding to fan mail. A few years later, when Ghost Hunters briefly rebooted without him, Grant gave a vague interview about the importance of spiritual safety in the paranormal field, a phrase that haunted longtime viewers. What most people didn't know was that shortly after his exit, several members of the old crew experienced bizarre phenomena, recurring nightmares, flickering lights, and the sound of knocking that followed them from location to location. One former cameraman claimed that during a flight, he fell asleep and woke to see Grant sitting beside him. Except Grant wasn't booked on the plane. The seat was empty when he blinked. Grant's silence wasn't just a retirement, it was a retreat. Whatever he'd encountered during those final years of Ghost Hunters had marked him, and the people around him, in ways none of them could explain. For nearly a decade after he left Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel, Grant Wilson lived a quiet life out of the spotlight, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He told friends he was focusing on music and family, that he was done with chasing shadows. But those close to him noticed something different, a growing sense of paranoia. Grant had moved 3 times in as many years. He never stayed in one house for long. In one rare interview, he admitted that he still heard things at night, soft whispers that began right as he tried to fall asleep. They sound like they're coming through a radio that's not plugged in, he said. He had started recording the sounds himself, convinced he was dealing with residual energy from his years investigating. He placed digital recorders in his home office, basement, and even his car. Most nights, they captured nothing but white noise. But on the morning of March 3, 2017, he found something different, a pattern. The static had formed into rhythmic pulses, almost like Morse code, except with faint syllables layered beneath. When Grant slowed the audio down, he claimed to hear words, "We never left." He sent the file to 2 audio specialists he'd worked with during his time on Ghost Hunters. Both returned the same analysis: no evidence of tampering, no external interference. The waveform didn't match any known sound pattern. The specialists advised him to destroy the files. Instead, Grant uploaded them into an old laptop that he used only for paranormal data. That's when the real terror began. Within days, his laptop began turning itself on at night. The speakers emitted bursts of static followed by what sounded like his own voice, but warped, echoing from a distance. He'd unplugged the system completely, only to find it powered back on hours later. And then came the smell. Grant began waking in the middle of the night to the stench of sulfur, the same odor he remembered from his Ghost Hunters days whenever something dark manifested. His wife later said she'd see him standing in the doorway at 3 a.m., staring blankly into the hall as if listening. When she asked what he was doing, he'd whisper, "They're talking again." Out of desperation, Grant reached out to a small circle of former investigators from the early TAPS years. Some refused to speak to him. Others admitted they'd been experiencing the same thing: interference, voices in white noise, and strange electronic malfunctions in their homes. One member even sent him a short recording captured by accident while testing new equipment. It was only a few seconds long, but what they heard made their blood run cold. A deep, distorted voice repeated the same message that Grant had caught: "We never left." That phrase became an obsession. Grant filled notebooks with transcripts, symbols, and sketches of patterns appearing in his data. To outsiders, it looked like he'd lost touch with reality, but to those who truly knew him, it looked like something was trying to re-establish contact, something that had followed him from that hospital corridor years before. In 2019, just before the short-lived Ghost Hunters revival premiered without him, Grant Wilson quietly resurfaced online. He uploaded a short video to his personal channel, a simple, dimly lit clip where he spoke directly to the camera. His face looked older, thinner, but his eyes carried the same intense calm he had on the Sci-Fi Channel years ago. "I've been doing this a long time," he began, "and I think some things were never supposed to be recorded. There are frequencies the human mind isn't meant to hear." Then he paused, glancing off camera as if listening to something just out of frame. The video ended abruptly. It was less than 2 minutes long. The upload vanished within 24 hours. but a handful of viewers downloaded it before it disappeared. In the background, behind Grant's voice, there was a faint sound that none of them noticed at first. A low hum, almost like a growl, stretched through static. When the clip was run through audio software, that hum revealed something terrifying. A secondary voice beneath his own. It was repeating 3 words over and over, perfectly synchronized with his speech. "Still with you." Days later, a private recording surfaced on Reddit from an anonymous user claiming to have worked as a sound engineer for Ghost Hunters during its later seasons. The file was allegedly pulled from an unaired episode, one that never made it past internal review. In it, you can hear Grant alone in an attic space asking standard EVP questions. For the first 2 minutes, nothing happens. Then a loud metallic clang echoes through the audio. The voice that follows is unmistakable, deep, resonant, and clear as day. "You brought us home." The authenticity of the clip has never been confirmed. The Sci-Fi Channel declined to comment, but for those who heard it, it was the missing puzzle piece, proof that whatever Grant encountered on that fateful investigation had attached itself not to a place, but to him. After the leak, Grant's name began trending again. Podcasts dissected every detail. Fans demanded answers, but Grant didn't respond. Instead, his official website went dark, his YouTube account deleted, and all public appearances were canceled. Friends said he'd moved again, this time to a remote cabin near the Utah mountains, where no Wi-Fi signal reached and no cameras could follow. Then, months later, a small paranormal blog posted a chilling update. A package had arrived at their office with no return address, just a flash drive labeled "For Grant." On it was a single audio file. The same distorted hum returned, now stronger, layered with faint breathing. And buried deep within the static was that same unmistakable whisper, "Still with you." Whoever or whatever Grant Wilson encountered hadn't just followed him home, it had learned how to speak. In 2021, without warning, Grant Wilson reappeared. He didn't announce a comeback or a new show. Instead, a cryptic video surfaced on a small independent podcast's live stream. The host, a longtime paranormal researcher, had received an anonymous message saying simply, "He's ready to talk." When the live stream began, Grant sat alone in a dimly lit room, his face half in shadow. He looked nothing like the man who once led Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel. His hair had gone gray, his voice quieter, more deliberate. The voice of someone who had spent too long in isolation. For nearly an hour, he spoke without notes, recounting what really drove him away from television, what he'd been hiding from the cameras, and why he believed something non-human had latched onto him. "It started as a hum," he said softly. "Then it became words. Then dreams. And in those dreams, there were faces. Faces of people I never met. Some were crying, others smiling. But all of them said the same thing. 'You let it in.'" The host pressed him to clarify what it meant. Grant hesitated, then looked directly into the camera. "We used to think hauntings were just energy, leftover memories. But this thing thinks. It listens. It learns through sound. Every EVP, every recording we ever made, it used us to hear itself." He paused for a long moment, then played an old clip through a small speaker beside him. The recording was faint but clear, a woman's voice whispering, "Grant, come back." He shut it off immediately. "That wasn't there when we first captured it," he said. That voice appeared years later on the same file. According to the podcast host, the temperature in the studio dropped by nearly 10 degrees during the broadcast. The feed began glitching, flickering with digital noise. One viewer claimed they saw a tall shadow move behind Grant during the stream, though no one else was in the room. Moments later, the feed cut abruptly. When it returned, Grant was gone. The camera pointed toward an empty chair, swaying slightly as if someone had just stood up. The host's microphone picked up one last whisper, low and distorted. "He's here now." The podcast was taken offline within the hour. The archived version uploaded to YouTube vanished days later, though users who had seen it swore they could still hear faint whispers playing in the background whenever they replayed the file, whispers that said their own names. That was the last confirmed sighting of Grant Grant Wilson for over a year, and it left a terrifying question in the air. Had Grant finally made contact, or had something finally claimed him? By 2023, rumors about Grant Wilson had reached fever pitch. Fans, skeptics, and former Sci-Fi Channel producers all had theories. Some said he was working in secret with a private research group to study what he'd uncovered. Others claimed he'd been institutionalized after audio-induced psychosis. A few insisted he was dead. Then, in late summer, a strange pattern began to emerge across paranormal circles. Several amateur ghost hunting channels reported receiving anonymous emails with encrypted attachment. When decrypted, each file contained the same 10-second audio clip. It was unmistakably Grant's voice, distorted but calm, saying, "Don't listen too long. It's learning your tone." Those who played the file reported odd occurrences: sudden power outages, corrupted devices, nightmares involving radio static. One channel owner uploaded the audio to their social feed as a warning. Within hours, their entire account disappeared. At the same time, a small group of fans claimed to have found Grant's abandoned cabin in Utah. They described it as untouched, no sign of struggle, but unsettlingly quiet. On the walls, dozens of Polaroids were taped in neat rows. Each one showed the same scene: an empty chair, a recorder on a table, and faint light streaks twisting through the air like smoke. The final photograph, still developing when they entered, showed a blurry outline in the doorway that resembled Grant's silhouette. The recorder on the table was still running. When investigators played back the last file, it began with heavy breathing, followed by Grant's voice, shaky but determined. "If anyone finds this, don't try to help. It feeds on curiosity. The moment you start asking questions, it knows your voice. That's how it finds you." Then came the same phrase that had haunted him for years: "We never left." After that, only silence. When the group uploaded snippets of the recording online, the Sci-Fi Channel issued a rare public statement, not denying the claims, but warning viewers not to tamper with unsanctioned archival material. The post vanished within hours. Those closest to Grant have since said that before disappearing, he mailed one final package to Jason Hawes. Inside was a notebook filled with strange drawings, binary code, and a single handwritten line at the end. The voices don't come from the dead. They come from what's waiting between frequencies. Jason never spoke publicly about what was in that notebook, but insiders claim that after receiving it, he quietly stopped filming any paranormal content. Whatever happened to Grant Wilson, whether he crossed a line between the living and something else, remains one of the darkest unsolved mysteries in television history.